Great. I would like to then call the Longmont Housing Authority meeting to order. Did you have a script?
Yeah, she's got
Oh,
it.
Jennifer, there it is. I looked before you had these out.
Yeah, we just.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call the Longmont Housing Authority Board of Commissioners regular meeting to order. It's February 18th, 2025. May we have a roll call, please? I'll start. Commissioner Chair Peck. Your Commissioner Hopper.
Oh, sorry, yes, Commissioner Hopper.
Commissioner Chris,
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director, Supervisor,
Tim Hall, Assistant City Attorney,
Carol Dominguez, Interim Executive Director.
Sean McCoy, Commissioner.
Lauren Sally, Assistant Director for LHA, Sarah Ray, Public Safety and LHA Staff.
Aaron.
Commissioner Yarbrough is here, as well as Commissioner Hidalgo Ferry. They will be in a second. Should we wait for them or here comes she? He's having a secret meeting.
were they in this?
They were here, I don't know where they went.
So send me away. Okay. Big block.
So Susie, I think Dawn's going to look for her. She's
Right. We just went through them first. Yes, good job.
Do you want to, we did roll call? Do you say your name and Commissioner Yarbrough has stepped in the room? Oh, there she is. You want to add your name to the roll call?
Yes, Susie Hidalgo-Faring,
Commissioner. Thank you. Okay, do we have any agenda revisions?
Not an agenda revision, but just as a reminder, you got a replacement voucher report when the packet went out last Wednesday.
Yes.
So that is in your hard copy packets here.
Okay, great. No documents submitted either?
No.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the January 7th, 2025 minutes?
I move that we approve January 7th, 2025 minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner McCoy, seconded by Commissioner Chris to approve the January 7th, 2025 minutes. All those, is there any discussion about the minutes? Corrections? No. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. So that passes unanimously. Public invited to be heard. I do not see any public here. So we will close, open and close the public invited to be heard portion. We're now at the old and new business. The first one is the public hearing on proposed changes to the HCB administrative plan. So turn that over to Molly.
So we're holding the public hearing tonight because we did a 45-day public notice and it was posted that tonight would be the public hearing night. We are actually extending public notice period, and you'll be considering the administrative plan changes next meeting, March 18th. But since we posted the public hearing, we wanted to make sure we held it in case anyone came.
So there is no one on the public hearing for the changes on the HCB administration. So let's move to resolution LHA 2025-02 to adopt the 2024 CMAP certification.
I'm taking this one. So the CMAP certification is something that we have to do for the voucher program. It's kind of a self-certification management where we have 14 areas that we have to test. We test a certain number of files to see if they pass that test, and then we kind of give ourselves a score. Then you guys sign that, and we send it off to HUD, and then HUD kind of does their analysis on that side because they have a system called PIC that kind of gathers some of the information, and they'll either approve it or they'll come back with questions. And so this year, our possible points for the 14 was 130 and LHA scored 130. So all the files that we tested passed.
Great.
So
Commissioner Pelican?
Yeah, just a couple of clarifications on scoring then. I noticed in some of the indicators, so indicator 3, 12, and 13, they have like a split valuation. Are you able to just clarify why, like some say 10 and 5 or 20 and 15?
I wish I could clarify that because I'm covering for Tracy and I don't know why it has a split.
Like I see that LHA still gets the full points, but I'm just curious why there's a split distinction there. And
And I
there's no
don't know.
split
I
in the
can
total.
Definitely follow up with
That
an
would be great.
answer to that question.
And email us.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Hopefully it's
Here we go.
Kendra, I have a
Yeah.
So I noticed it says 461 units in 9 properties, but if you're sampling 20 tiles,
So-
it's 2 out of each property.
So it's not our properties, it's the HCD vouchers. So the HCD vouchers are, we have about 410 right now.
Well, I'm looking at the intergovernmental agreement, it says 513.
That's what we can go up to. So HUD allots us a certain ACC number. So our ACC number is 513. So we could do a total of 513 vouchers, but we also have a budget. And so we can't go up to that level because of our fair market rents. And so there's kind of a balancing act, like right now we're at 410 to be within budget, and we're kind of in a shortfall at that. So they give you a limit of vouchers that you can release, but we have to base that off what money they give us, and we can go up to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay, so we have 410, is what you're saying.
Yeah, right now we're at about 410.
the 513 is a not to exceed, and that number was set many, many years ago when the budget amount that HUD gave you would allow you to do 513. But as they adjust fair market rents, and you're looking at project-based vouchers, they have to give you more money. And if they don't give you more money, then it basically is shrinking the number of vouchers that you actually have available.
Well, 410, and you tested 20, that's not a very high percentage. 4 or 5%.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually kind of audit-wise what they test as well. So that follows pretty much kind of the standard to test every single file. Because you may have 410 vouchers, but throughout the program, you may have actually had 510 households.
I presume this is a randomized test.
Yeah,
situation.
it's a randomized calculator that she selects a random sample of testing and then tests those files.
Now, okay, so then one other question I have. Indicator 7, not applicable.
Expanding housing opportunities.
Yeah, without looking at the details of that, I would assume we can't really expand housing opportunities because we are at a limit and a budget limit for that. I wish Tracy was here because she probably
Yeah, I think
knows these
that-
to the detail.
There's a specific voucher program, housing opportunity, I'm wondering if it's that.
So expanding housing opportunities applies only to PHAs with the jurisdictions in metropolitan FMR.
What was the last part of jurisdiction?
Metropolitan FMR areas, which is just a high qualification for type of jurisdictions. So I think it's probably like, are you Denver?
Urban areas.
Yeah.
And so you just check a box.
So we don't like the qualifications.
If you go under the scoring sheet, you can see our check boxes there. It actually gives you more detail of each qualification under the performance indicators. So our score is above, but then it's just a yes, no check boxes, and there's more detail there.
It's in the certification form itself.
Okay, thank you.
I'm impressed at the ratings. LHA's doing well. So you need direction to either approve this resolution and authorize a signature of the superintendent. Does somebody want to make that motion?
I move that we follow that, pass this resolution. And what was the second part, Mayor?
That's it, that's all you need.
Resolution LHA 2025-B.
Second. Been moved by Commissioner McCoy, seconded by Commissioner Yarbrough, that we approve the CMAP. Is that what it's called? Yeah, resolution. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
I just want to say that this is really, really good because the reason why, because this is random, so that means you have to have all your stuff together in order for you to get a high rating. And that means everything has to be in order unless you just got lucky and the files that they chose were in top shape.
We don't make
And
them
that is not how that works. I know, because I've been through it myself. And to get this high rating like this, you all have done amazing, amazing work. And I just, me, myself, who've been property manager for HUD myself, I'm so proud of you all. This makes me very proud of, you know, all the things that you all are doing. I mean, y'all don't know. I'm just saying, I know, so I'm very proud of you all, so thank you.
Yes. Ditto.
Well, what I would say on some of this, you know, like to Tim's point, we don't control what we do. This is determined by HUD. But when they talk about PHA completes a re-examination for each participating family at least every 12 months, what comes along with that on the back side of it is when they find families that aren't meeting the requirements. And then having to have the hard conversation with those families and talking about, do we continue the voucher, do we not continue the voucher, do we have repayment options? And so many of these processes have following procedures that creates really tough conversations with Tracy and the ACB team. Which I've been I'm per your direction, I'm part of all of this in terms of making arrangements.
I did get information on the split scoring. So you are allotted 20 points if you're at like 98% of the sample control. So if you score at 98% or higher, you get the full 20 points. If you score below 98 to 96, you get 15. So you get some credit. It's like when you get credit for showing the work on the math test. So you get some credit, and then if it's lower than that, you don't get the points. So that's the reasoning for the split score in those sections.
Great.
And then for everyone to remind them on this is just one piece of work that we do to evaluate it. They have investor audits, LIHTC audits, HUD audits, state audits. Our auditors come in and audit, so this is only one of many that we have to do.
So we did vote on that and it passed unanimously, so just for the record. We're now on Resolution LHA 2025-03. This is an approval of intergovernmental agreement with City of Longmont for 2025 support and services.
This one?
Okay.
So this is one that you see every year. This one actually has the fewest changes that you've seen yet from 2024 to 2025. Really what we did is we just slightly modified the supportive services model that's carried out by our clinicians just to make sure that it reflects our plans to, we have currently 2 clinicians that are city positions that the city pays for that are operating out of the suites. And we have 1 clinician, that we budgeted out of LHA and been trying to fill and have not been successful in finding a candidate. So we are upping it to a clinician 2 with a split primarily paid for by LHA and a small amount paid for by the city to make sure that we have success at filling clinician 2s, and the 2s that we got are wonderful. And so that'll really increase the service level at the suites and free up a little bit of time for them to do more citywide work as well. And then the other major changes are really just updates to our development management services section to update the latest status of the projects and what we're going to be working on in 2025.
Okay.
So Molly, I think this is where I marked that the numbers were different. 461 units in 9 properties, but then the slide will say 517 properties, which is the correct one.
That is with Zinnia on top of there.
Right.
So, right, which those just came on in late 2024. These are the properties that LHA owns and our voucher program. So we don't own Zinnia, but we do manage Zinnia. And none of the services, well, other than our administrative work, like Lauren and Harold and I, that pop in and help on management issues at Zinnia, but we don't actually fund any property management specific positions at Zinnia outside of that specific budget. So that might have been just something we need to update in our whereas clauses now that those are on board. But in case it is talking about ownership, this does say management. So that should be
the resolution is correct, or the IGA?
The IAGA is correct in terms of the ones that we manage. 517 in 10 properties.
Okay, is there any discussion on this resolution?
Yeah, 2 questions.
Sure.
Forgive me, I'm new to all this. This might be a very straightforward question. On the financial obligations, I'm just curious from like an administrative standpoint. I get that LHA and the city are separate entities here. How from an efficiency of administration do all of these kind of transfers back and forth operate? Like, is this a lot back and forth administratively? Is it kind of 2 systems that talk to each other very well?
No.
Any clarification on kind of how this like financial transfer works?
Yeah, so for the positions itself, they are budgeted, we all use the same Munis software to record our time and get paid. Each individual is budgeted specifically, so the city has specific account codes that are designated for LHA, and then their accounting team has to invoice LHA because we have a completely separate financial system, and then we pay back the city. So that's how it kind of works. So we built the IGA. We originally had the IGA with amounts in it, but every year that changes. You could have somebody have different benefits, so we more segregated it to say based on the approved budget for those positions.
So here's what this is what this really looks like. This is the LHA org chart and what it takes to make LHA function with the co-benefits that the city and the LHA have found from operating together. This looks like crazy making, and this is really what that IAGA actually outlines. It keeps going. So here's our City of Longmont funded positions, our joint funded, our pure LHA funded, the city position, but LHA funded, and then, sorry, I can't see that far. City consulting services. Oh, that's our specialties over here. So this is what it takes to make LHA happen. And when you're operating just face to face, it doesn't seem that crazy until you look at it on paper. So.
Well, and part of it is, so when you look at this, when you look at the administrative piece, from a budgeting standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. So we look at the dollar amounts, and that's what we need to move. Now, when you get into the housing authority area and you start looking at the costs that are allocated to the property, it gets more complicated because you have to allocate the actual cost of the property. So when we look at snow removal, for example, it was even worse than it is now because when you had contractor services, you had to bill the hours of the contractor at each individual property. We restructured snow removal to say, here's a fixed cost. And it's a fixed cost allocated to each property, but you can't You just have to go through that with each individual property because each individual property is its own corporation.
Because they're separate legal entities.
Yes.
Okay, and so the staff, let's call it sharing, though maybe that's not the right legal term here, is actually an operational efficiency to some degree between the two organizations.
Correct.
Even though there's some other internal administrative and financial transfers to kind of make all dot all the i's and cross all the t's here.
Yeah, to kind of go back a little bit, so when they went to the city council and we started this, we went through several evolutions. One was I was the executive board member that had operational control, but I was on the board. We then went to the city council as the board. I'm the interim executive director, but what was driving all of this is when you looked at the operational cost of just running a housing authority. They were paying $250 to $275 for an executive director. They were paying $100 to $125,000 for a chief financial officer. And they couldn't afford to fund any other positions. They were literally going bankrupt based on what we were seeing. So what's happened is
So there's about $400K right there between those two positions
Yeah,
for
so-
senior level admin.
right. So when we did this agreement, initially it was a savings of about $275,000 or so. We haven't calculated that because we don't benchmark the executive director. But what we've been able to do is to actually take those dollars and push it to its lowest level of the organization. So now we have, are able to compensate property managers appropriately, hire assistant managers, have an adequate number of maintenance personnel, which they didn't have, and then actually add an assistant director and other components to where we're able to do more than we've ever done. And we've had revenue growth through development projects. But it's not incredibly efficient, but I think Kendra has this as efficient as it can be, understanding the structures because everything's segregated.
Right, because you, Sandy, Jim, Zach, Joni all kind of cover some of the responsibilities.
Primarily it's Molly and me, but they have
Okay.
people within their groups that assist the housing authority in what they're doing.
Got it. How long have you been interim executive director?
4 years?
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. I have one other question on efficiencies of a different degree, which is I was looking at. Let's see. This is section 3. So this is Article 1, Section 3. I'll give you a page number in the packet. Article 1, Section 3, subsection. No, hold on. I lied. Article 1, Section 2, subsection D, or page 22 of the packet in the PDF. In the middle of this says the city shall assist in creating a residential unit turnover plan and checklist to ensure new residents have a safe, clean, functional place to live, including upgrading each unit to the latest standards for fixtures and equipment, keys, and hardware. Just curious, since we're talking about all of this resource sharing, the city also partners with PRPA, Public Power Authority, on the Efficiency Works program. I'm just curious, like during that turnovers, I don't know the exact process for how you do like efficiency upgrades that could help support a safe and functional place within the standards. Like, has there been coordination with the Efficiency Works program to do some of those types of upgrades too?
Yep. And then on LPC's program side, actually one of our prior city housing side staff went over to run the LPC side of efficiency work. So we already had that connection anyway, plus we're all city. So we absolutely have tapped into that. We did all of our, remind me, it's all of at Briarwood, the P-TECH units at Briarwood, did an upgrade on that.
Sorry, P-TECH means?
It's part of the HVAC system.
Got it, okay.
We did upgrades at that as a pilot project in partnership with LPC, just to test out one of their newer programs. So we definitely have connections there.
Even to the point when we did the resyndication of Village on Main, we partnered with LPC in terms of the rooftop solar, and then sent over. We receive money from the county and we're partnering with LPC in terms of rooftop solar. But it's the only way to do it on affordable housing projects, because when you go in through the LIHTC program, the margins are so slim that we tried it once and you literally run into a parking lot issue. We thought we had enough to do it on Aspen Meadows Senior, but we ran into a parking lot issue and it killed the budget. So it requires partnerships in order to fund those types of programs.
Easy data readily available on like the number of like units or whatever kind of P-type evaluations that you'll do.
I can try and pull what we have
Don't
and
spend
share it.
a ton of time, just if it's readily.
Sure.
something
I know we
you can
have
search
the Briarwood program specifically, and then at our other properties, a lot of the upgrades come with a major rehabilitation, so Aspen Meadows Senior, Village on Main, and our new builds. And then without that though, it's kind of an incremental
Sure, that makes
finding
sense.
partnership, but we can try and pull the data as we have.
Cool, that's relatively easy to find. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, that's all I got.
So you- Okay, can we have direction then on LHA 2025 okay? We have a motion?
Should we modify the resolution?
Oh, you're
The
gonna
number of
modify it?
units, is that a possibility?
There's a discrepancy between the resolution.
Just the number of units managed on the resolution versus the
On the
IGA.
resolution.
Okay.
I mean, it's non-functional language,
It's
not.
non-substantive,
Uh, I don't quite have any errors there.
Can you just make mention of that as an amendment to the resolution or as a?
Can we vote and have it?
You can amend the
added for
resolution by motion and then vote on the amended resolution,
Mhm.
so just to get that.
So I move that we amend this, I guess the second clause of the multifamily rental portfolio of 461 units and 9 properties to 517
Yes.
units on 10 properties.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Commissioner Hidalgo Faring that we amend the resolution 2025-03 from 461 to 570. And it's been seconded by Commissioner Chris. Is there any more discussion on this? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? So that amendment passed. Now we need to vote on the amended resolution LHA 2025-03 as amended.
Okay, so I'll move resolution LHA 2025-03 as amended.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Commissioner Chris. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And that also passes unanimously. All
Just
right,
send me the work chart.
we're at our next,
Sure, and
next.
I think when we do a briefing with you too, we'll have it all.
Oh, okay.
great, we're at the 2024 LHA accomplishments and the goals for 2025.
Sure. So you have a giant spreadsheet in your packet.
Yes.
I pulled it up here. It's still too small, but I can zoom in if we need
Thank
to on
you for
specific
using
areas.
this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would never be able to see that.
So history on these. These were the goals that the LHA board created back in 2022. And we've been operating and doing this report out ever since. I think that what you'll find overall is we've made a ton of headway on most of these. Some of them we did have to change direction on, but overall there's not that much left to continue into 2025 in terms of the very specific things that we included here. These are pretty granular because at the time we were trying to stabilize LHA, change culture. It was very, these are really pointed. So I think that maybe after this year, we might have this filled out and kind of and maxed out. So I would leave that up to the board to decide if they'd like to target a broader process further in the future. But I think for 2025, we're gonna report out what we plan to do that is in line with these goals from 2022.
So I haven't read all of the 2025 goals, unfortunately. I should have read one. But what I don't see, and correct me if I'm wrong, is You had asked us, Harold, at one point, what other, the land that is by Xenia that you we co-own with the Xenia developer, what do we want to do with that? Is it the Xenia developer?
It's a Zinnia developer, they had a purchase option
Yes.
on that land. I have to look at the status of that purchase option.
It's
My understanding
still
is
in effect.
it's in effect, but they're
But
not
they
really
needed
a functional way
to
for
apply for LIHTC funding by now, so if conversations continue, it probably need to be looked at it, extended at a minimum. So we have not moved forward on that so far. It's still there, it's still city and LHA owned. We have not pushed forward so far on what to do there. I think because they have that option, it's kind of the onus is on them to come to us to start saying, we're ready. I think what they're trying to do right now, actually, I know, they need Zinnia to settle
Yes.
and see how the Zinnia suites, how the whole campus structure is functioning and really getting it solid.
So my concern really is that we have 4 positions up for election on council next year in November. I don't know, well, none of us know how that's going to turn out and what they're going to do or think about LHA and the funding, etc. If there's anything that we can do to get this property started so that hopefully it can't be undone moving forward, I don't know what that would involve. I would like you to look at that. We gave you some ideas of what which I found astounding that you even asked, because all my time on council, we were never asked, what do you want to do with these lands? What do you want to do with, so I was very humbled that you would even say, where do you want to go?
Yeah, I think to Molly's point about assessing how that whole campus is working right now is we've been at critical mass on that in the sense of some of the issues that we're seeing associated with Zinnia. And we'll talk about that in the operational, is that what we're going to do? There's some challenges that we're working through right now.
Okay.
It's similar to the challenges that we experienced at the suites when we had to deal with the suites. And we had to work with the state over the course of about 2 years, but a few things we had to be really focused on rules, holding people accountable and those types of things. Zinnia is slightly different in terms of we don't own it. There are certain requirements with the state that are coming into play. And so we're partnering with them right now in terms of having a conversation with the state and what we can do, and that actually ties to the next item that we're going to talk to you all about.
And generally, it takes time to build a community when you have 55 people coming all at once. It's taken us years to get suites to where it is today. So we're working on community building is a big thing right now.
Okay. I just wanted to put that on your radar.
Yeah, was it last week? Or week before last?
Last Friday.
When I was gone?
Yeah, when you were going.
Yeah, that was beginning of February. Couple
So
weeks ago.
we had an issue where we had an individual that had assaulted people in the past. Lauren got the call that someone had a gun, hit someone else over the head with a gun. And so Quincy, who's the regional property manager, Quincy and I ran out, met Lauren there. Fortunately, the police did a great job in handling that issue. But at the same time, we had another issue blow up where someone was running through the parking lot, half clothed, and it was like 40 degrees, trying to get into the suites, trying to get into Zinnia. It's an individual that we know has been, they're sneaking them into Zinnia. And so we had about an hour and a half of complete chaos. And then we had to do all the trespassing. That's really kind of what we're talking about. But definitely we'll look at it and see what we can do in terms of options and then how we look at that in the future. I think we've talked about it, and All Roads has also said this, is At what point do you have enough of a congregation that you want to do something different? We've even talked about if we do it, maybe we do ground floor commercial, where we have office space for support organizations that can office in the area, and then do housing above it. That way we bring more resources to the location that can also help. So we've been exploring some options, but yeah, it's definitely been a struggle. Yeah.
Is there any other specific questions, or should I can do a paraphrase of each block?
I have a couple of things I want to talk about. So one of the goals is increasing access to rental assistance for Longmont households with low moderate incomes. When we talked about the voucher, increasing the voucher 10% year over year, obviously these were aspirational goals. And we have had increase in voucher funding. I would say that I think probably my biggest concern, probably over the next 4 years, is really what's HUD funding going to look like related to vouchers. Because, I mean, if you look at the reports recently, I know that we're cutting a lot of HUD staff.
The city side HUD rep today left. We don't know how, but it's hitting us directly.
Yeah, so they're, well, I'm sure people are ejecting into a job they can get, but, so there's a lot of uncertainty there. We talked to you all a while back about moving in where we were in shortfall, and that was because of the way HUD set the rental rates that drove it up prematurely. We actually went through the process. We ended up not being in shortfall, but we were closed by 20, what was it, Kendra? 20,000 or so.
It was about 40,000, but at the end of the year, we were not in shortfall.
We were not in shortfall,
But-
so we're having to manage the vouchers.
But we're projected to be in 2025.
And up until this point, that's really been the only way organizations have received increased funding. So in talking to some of our HUD reps, it's not uncommon for housing authorities to intentionally manage to shortfall, because that's how you get more money. My comment to him is, why would you do that with the uncertainty of the federal budget? Because you're subject to annual allocations. So we don't do that. And so some...
Sorry, can you explain the differences in those two processes one more time?
So they give you an allotted amount of money, and you have to have a 4% reserve, 4.5% reserve?
Yeah. It was 2 to 4.
2 to 4%
That's what they
reserve, so you need to be in that sweet spot. A lot of housing authorities will actually spend into shortfall, which means historically they had more money they had to pay than what was allocated by the federal government. So you then go into a shortfall process, and they go, okay, you're in shortfall, we're going to give you this extra money. Once you go into shortfall and you get the extra money, you keep it year over year over year.
Everything the voucher goes down online.
Yeah, so we don't manage it that way because there's inherent risk of what we're dealing with today. So what we've been doing to manage it, when Kendra's projecting a shortfall, is we will hold vouchers back. So instead of reissuing the voucher, we'll hold the voucher, and we're managing our shortfall real time. So we have a 2-year tool. Every day, the 2-year tool goes out 1 day further in time, and we're constantly managing the vouchers based on the money that we have.
Gives a little bit more of a cushion to manage risk.
Yeah, so this is going to be, I think, an issue, just to let you all know in terms of what the funding looks like in getting additional vouchers. I am not optimistic at this point that there's going to be more funding going into HUD to get vouchers.
How much do we currently get from HUD, approximately?
It's on the voucher report. It's like 6, hold on, I have that open.
Like, what's our risk exposure?
We had 6.9 million, and we were.
In 24?
In 2024. And that includes the reserve amount that they hold for us. So you don't want to go over the 6.9. We were 24,000 short of this, not short. Shy.
Which is,
Yes.
if I'm understanding this correctly, which is good, that we went very close but didn't exceed.
Correct.
Correct. So we're managing it that number, she's managing it daily, not weekly.
Well, and I think HUD also realized they made a boo-boo in a calculation. So when they increased the fair market rent, they went too high. And it caused not just us, it caused a lot of housing authorities to go in shortfall. Because now you're allowing every single one of those vouchers to go up to that fair market rent. And if they raised it $300 per unit per month, I talked to my HUD rep, and there were agencies that were $10 million in shortfall. Because they have so much money, but that just put them way over the edge. And so in 2025, they reduced their fair market. So I've never seen that happen. It's always went up. But 2024, they went up, and 2025, they're going back down.
Compared to 23, how much more did we get?
Normally
From
you
HUD.
see specifically,
We did get a small amount, but the fair market rents aren't directly tied to the amount of money that you get.
Sure.
It's more, so you've got X number of dollars with an increase in the last year, which is what, 23 to 24. And then based on the rents in your area, you can accommodate X number of vouchers.
Nice.
So it's always this balancing act of making sure we've got it, threading the needle just right to maximize the number of vouchers we can put out, but also stay under.
So the number of vouchers is not the number that HUD gives you. The number of vouchers is a function of how much the fair market value rent
In your
is
area.
and how much money you get from HUD.
Yes,
It's
so how many ways can you divvy
some
it?
division there.
So that, what that means though is $6.9 million of rental assistance came from HUD to Longmont in 2024. Of course, our voucher holders are not only in Longmont, but many are either from other housing authorities, so maybe the number is about right.
in 2023, we had 6.2. So they gave us a really good cushion. But with the fair market increase, it swallowed that up. I mean, we didn't get to add vouchers. We had to reduce our voucher count because of it.
That's the whole not to exceed the 5 number versus we're at 410. And I just think we need to brace ourselves that you could be at 390.
If there are cuts
Yes.
to the amount of funding that's given, even if the fair market rent value doesn't change.
Yeah.
And that's why there will be a cut to
I mean, there's so many different variables in that.
Sure.
So then if you go into shortfall and HUD doesn't backfill the shortfall, then you have to make your own decisions. Like, do you?
So then we have to what?
If you go into shortfall and HUD doesn't backfill the shortfall, then you have to make hard decisions about, are we gonna make voucher holders make up the difference? And a lot of them can't. Are we gonna kick people off of the program? I think, if I recall correctly, I have to look at the oldest.
Yeah, oldest people on the program are the ones that go first, that you have to kick off the program. You have to stop porting in.
Oldest is in, had their voucher markets, not the, not the.
Yeah.
And there's stipulations, like you can't do elderly, you can't do, families with children. I mean, so those are kind of exempt from the rule, but they do have specific, waterfall of how you have to work it.
And when you go in this shortfall process and they're talking to you, they're asking you those questions. What have you done? How have you done this? And we actually will probably, had we gone into shortfall, I think we were going to get some money this year. Because all the questions, what have you been doing to manage your voucher count? Well, we've been holding them. We haven't been reissuing the vouchers. Well, then we need to give them that answer. So there's trigger points for it.
But we're not porting in anyway, right?
We're not absorbing our port-ins, so we do have.
What is put in?
So port-in is when somebody comes from another housing authority, like in California or
transfer
Michigan,
from-
and they come to Longmont, they get to keep their voucher and they port into our agency. We have the opportunity to absorb it, which means it becomes part of our voucher count, or we don't absorb it and we still administer it, but we get less of an administrative fee and we can't absorb them. And it's a lot more, technically it's backwards. You should get more administrative when you're doing a port-in because there's more to it. So right now I think we're at like 14 port-ins, and we try to absorb them when we can, but that's something that's stopped us from doing because we're in shortfall.
If it's not already obvious, the voucher program is one of the most heavily regulated, complex, checks and balances, performance reporting, it's heavily managed. And that's our job to thread that needle too.
Were there anything on the new focus areas in 2025 that you wanted to highlight, or?
I think overall, what we're looking to do in 2025 that plays into a couple of locations in here is really we did a lot of staff capacity increasing and getting everything on the staffing side stabilized last year. That this year, we are pretty much full staffed up. There's always changes coming with property management right now, but generally, in terms of our capacity compared to prior years, what we really want to do in 2025 is look at some of our internal processes, come up with established policies to make sure everybody's doing the same thing the same way. They all have the same resource catalog to pull from. We really just want to strengthen up our standard operating procedures and look inward and get everything really solid, and we have time to do that now. Well,
That's good.
that's the idea with the staff capacity. But that is a big goal for 2025, is just getting our internal house really, I mean, it's in order, but getting it really highly efficient, so. And then there's updates here to our development that you'll see. One thing that you'll see on here in the very last page in red is some new things that I haven't added on anything in any prior years, but this is really, I think it already fits within the intent of this goal, but it's adding some strategies about it. Considering incorporating mixed income development and property management into our portfolio to provide opportunities for residents to advance through the housing spectrum and diversify LHAAB's revenue streams. So that's something that we've added on there, so that would be something for you all to consider.
So here's the why behind this. We've, obviously looked at a project that was in the middle income housing world, and we were trying to make it fit. And it's kind of hard once it's so far down the road to make it fit. But what is clear to us is that what's clear to me at least, is staying in where you're only doing purely affordable housing doesn't generate the revenue you need to really propel the organization forward. So what some housing authorities do, Boulder does some of this too, is that they will build an affordable housing project but also potentially include some market rate units or attainable units. And what that does is that lets you manage your pro forma in a way where you can generate more income over time. And in looking at this, what that does is then you can structure the developer fees and you can structure the cash flow to where it's building over time. So then you can get equity building within whatever it is, whatever type of structure you're going to build. So you're generating equity in that structure, you're generating developer fees, you're generating increased revenue, because if you bring in different levels, then your rent structure is going to look a little bit different. And so what that does is that stabilizes the cash flow over time. And so what we're saying in this is that we probably, I think the next project, and we have some ideas on this, needs to be set, and it's true inclusive housing.
Right.
And that's the other piece of this, but the next project needs to be a project that has affordable units, has attainable units. And when I say attainable, income restricted attainable, and then potentially non-income restricted attainable, that the market that functions more like a market rate, so that you're diversifying your portfolio in that structure, so that you're creating pressure relief valves over time as you're bringing revenue in, and you're we're getting cash flow out of these properties, because when you get into the budgets on this, what you'll see is a cash flow on traditional affordable like-type properties is always really slow. We can't continue doing that. And the only way we're going to increase fund balance and other revenue streams is through developer fees. And at some point, that's going to end, because space to build, those types of things. So if council, or if the board agrees with this, we think there's an opportunity coming soon where between the Affordable Housing Fund, we can look at being intentional about creating really a mixed-use development with potentially ground floor commercial, affordable housing units, attainable housing units, non-income restricted attainable housing units that I think has the potential to diversify the portfolio. And the project we're looking at,
With the goal of being more self-sustainable.
self-sustaining over time, where we actually control our destiny versus letting state and federal government control our destiny on some of these things. The pro forma that we were looking at worked, but the things that we needed to do just made the gap grow and grow. We think if we're intentional and we focus on it on the front end, we could probably come together with something. Now, what that'll entail is a financing model that LHA issues a debt. LHA would have to go to the city and look at a moral obligation, which means if for some reason they can't pay for it, the city's saying they're back here. What that does is it bites the interest rate down in terms of the debt that you're issuing. And then we have to structure, all of these backstops to make sure that the moral ob is never counted on until you get to stability.
What about the land cost though? Is that going to be a partnership with an organization that will give us land at a value that is less than market?
So theoretically,
Or do they own the
we may
land?
have land now. The Affordable Housing Fund owns some land that we
Let me just pull it up.
can bring up the map. And I want to be high level, we may need an executive session on this because I don't want to. So what we know, can you bring up that area over here? So what we know is when we had the flood, the stormwater fund bought some of this property. We then used ARPA funds to buy this property. But when we're looking at the development of the First and Main Transit Station, in order to, based on what you all talked about earlier with rail and some of the other things, we need to really speed up what we're dealing with. But we've got some stormwater water quality issues, and the most efficient way to deal with them is actually to do some type of water quality and stormwater retention facility on the property that the Affordable Housing Fund owns. I want to trade it for this. And then if that's all internal, so there's no cost associated with it. Obviously, we'll have to look at acquiring additional property, but to me, this then starts fitting into the STEAM vision that we have, where you have height that you can deal with. You have commercial opportunities that you can deal with because it's on Main Street. And so generally, that's what we're talking about, but then you really look at, when you're talking about rental units, I think that's well positioned geographically for a large number of rental units. It's not adjacent to any neighborhoods. And it fits in with all of your plans that you have with your other hat on in terms of STEAM, First and Main, and vision. But I think it does have the potential to drive additional revenue streams for the housing authority.
So that, the Boston parcel is in a qualified census tract, where the Royal Mobile Home Park parcel is not. So that has some value in it if you're talking about trying to do LIHTC there. That helps if you're trying to bring in either commercial that is public, what's the word I'm thinking of? Public, yes, but it's basically like a public benefit commercial space. Then we could include that in the basis of the tax credits, which is also really valuable. So there's some efficiencies to things here.
And public use.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
So is there some sort of like percentage ceiling when it comes to a mixed income underneath the housing authority?
Not really.
So you could build a ton of market rate apartments underneath the housing authority and still be granted a property tax exemption?
No, it wouldn't. So see, that's the key. So then that's the other value to this. And so over here, when you look at the fact that one of the challenges we've had with the Urban Renewal Authority is that if we did something here, it's almost fully tax exempt, which means that you're not driving any increment into the tax base. You would have, like the commercial would be taxable, the affordable wouldn't be taxable. The attainable that's income restricted wouldn't be. The other pieces probably would be taxable, so you actually would generate some tax revenue with the property versus what you typically do with the affordable project. So you're right, it would be, and that impacts the debt too, because then you'll have non-taxable and you could potentially have taxable debt that you have to balance as well.
So is the strategy here kind of twofold? With the retention space on the west side of Maine, swap that for the housing to get the LIHTC credit, and then the retention space, this retention area frees up for the urban renewal area, more concentrated development north of that.
Yep.
And so you're able to claim tax increment benefit there.
Potentially. Yeah.
While, yeah, and then the LIHTC benefit on the east side.
Yeah.
So the housing authority, and I think I already know this answer, does not build for sale units. They all have to be rental, even if they're deed restricted.
They don't have to be. There are some housing authorities doing some for sale work.
Yeah, isn't true north for sale?
It's
It is.
That's the city.
And that's the city.
It's the same people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some housing authorities doing home ownership. In our sense, we have the city side and the housing authority side working side by side anyway.
Yes,
So
yeah.
the home ownership has been concentrated there, but it is all the same people. So-
Well, because when you said mixed, but you need to generate revenue, I thought, why don't we put in that same development some for sale units to generate revenue?
If we didn't have construction defects,
We can do the townhouse.
so like Austin actually does a really good job of this. So Austin, you'll see mix where they have ground floor commercial, they'll have a hotel, they'll have some home ownership in some of their structures. But the reality is that creates a different liability that you have to deal with. So when you think about the cost of insurance on True North for 55, the first 55 was $600,000 of insurance. I think I told you all it's going to be around 2.2, 2.3 total insurance cost. Well, that just balloons on a product like this because you're managing your exposure in townhomes and quadplexes because it's only limited to what's connected.
Okay.
And so, yeah, obviously, if we didn't have that, you could be really creative and then say, okay, if we could get land use approval to say go to 8 stories at this location, your top 2 could be a for sale product, and that helps then blend what you're doing within your overall capital stack, and then you mix rental in the ground floor commercial.
Okay.
But that's the challenge.
Is the city taking a position?
So I was very excited when I saw this at the, and I wondered if you had considered partnerships to share some of this building to where it's not all city-owned property, but you have a component of the development.
Yeah, that's all part of how you look at it and what risk, and I think that's part of the evaluation is do you go in and do you, obviously there will be a partnership. Is it a fee developer where you just pay them a fee to develop it and you have full ownership? Is it you own, is it a 50-50 ownership mix? Is it 70-30? we've got to start this from the ground up. And I think starting it from the ground up is easier than trying to take something that's already 3/4 of the way, and then we're sitting there going, no, we need at least 12% affordable housing in it, not this. Or we need 17 to 20% affordable housing in it, and we need this. And when you start trying to do that on something that's already designed, it becomes really hard. The economics just don't work. Where we tried it, we added $8 million. And the board and I trying to sort through some of these issues.
But as you work on these projects, you can move that direction.
Correct. You can, and those are options, and then it's just looking at the economics of it. How much revenue do you want to drive off of it? And it really is bringing, what you want to do is sort of have that quasi-private sector mentality to this, but not compromise the values that you all have set forward in terms of what we want to accomplish. And it's doable.
Yeah. Well, I'm enthused about it. I think this is an excellent idea and probably the next phase and will make us self-sufficient in this way.
The other thing is if you can generate the equity off of it, in about 7 years, you don't necessarily have to have a moral ought to issue debt on the next one because you can utilize the equity that you have in this one to secure the debt.
So Molly, you were going to.
Yep, I think one more general comment is just noting how much we've done in this first goal that has a bunch of strategies here about culture building, communication with residents, really just putting a new face on LHA from what some of our existing residents had prior to 2020. We brought in so many partner organizations this year. We brought in to do educational activities at the properties. Kaiser, True Pace, Cultivate, Next Light, Recovery Cafe, Center for People with Disabilities. DU came and did a permanent supportive housing research event, declutter events. We always do holiday and birthday events. And then community manager organized resident appreciation events. And I think that that is some of what, since we've been talking about community building, some of the major things that we have really turned LHA in the eyes of our residents into what we wanted it to be from 2022 when we made this. So I think that's a good summary.
It's taken a while, so thanks. We don't need any direction on this, it was just informational. So we can talk.
Sorry, two more questions on this. One for maybe my fellow commissioners here. Has the City of Longmont ever taken a position on the construction defects law? And has it, or sat down with our representatives to?
I thought I answered this during coffee with council.
I didn't want to go deeper on this, but like, have we like sat down with our representatives to actually like walk through some of these very challenges where this would address that we have?
Yeah.
Every year.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Isn't there some sort of legislation?
Pardon me, what
Well,
you
obviously, so is
Isn't there some
the
sort of legislation that's?
The bill has been dropped on construction.
That one, it has, and that one,
Yeah.
last year there were 2 bills that were
Right.
dropped. One that seemed more reasonable and one that wasn't. The one that dropped, a quick review, is not great because it almost moves too far in the other direction.
Okay, yeah.
And I think there's another one that may drop, but we haven't seen that one.
Not yet.
So the one that you saw, is that the one from Shannon Bird?
Yeah.
Is
I
that
think it
Kurt
was.
Meyer? Kurt Meyer was in that one, the one that I saw.
Okay, because Shannon Bird was one that was mentioned on
Okay.
Saturday.
So that might answer your question in the sense that
They said that that one didn't drop yet.
those
Whoever that guy
recommendations
was.
or what Sandy brings
Joe
forward.
and something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then my last question is entirely different from all of this, which is
Oh, good.
number 6 under the goals.
Yeah.
You mentioned the partnership. Can you clarify more of the partnership with VITA for transportation here? Because isn't that the same service that we use for Longmont Ride?
No.
No, different
Different
VITA?
VITA.
Ideas.
Different VITA.
Yep.
Okay.
So this
It
one
is
is for trips for seniors to grocery stores.
And this is a
Funded.
funded
VITA.
transportation service specific for seniors
Seniors
Yes.
living in LHA properties.
at LHA properties.
And that isn't that the one that council
Yeah.
funded?
Yeah.
Is
Our
this,
council continues.
Because
For-
RTD funds the,
yeah, forgive my ignorance of this, and this is no slight to LHA here, but is that redundant with Longmont Ride?
No,
No.
not really, but I understand that participants sign up to go on Tuesday or whatever to.
To go to the grocery stores.
Yeah.
So they're
And that
going,
vehicle
So it's a
gone
van.
for a period of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it's a
It'll be a
van
van.
service.
Somebody
Yes.
loves.
Oh, it's a higher capacity
Yeah.
service.
It's like a community outing.
an ADA outing.
Yes.
Okay, so this is serving a much different volume than a couple on-demand Longmont Ride. Okay, just wanted to
Now-
make sure that with that new addition that we weren't.
Yeah, they do it together, and sometimes they have like a volunteer, Arlene Zortman who's on the board, goes a lot, helps them with it. It is something that we're watching, because we do know that many of our rather older adults that live in our properties, we need them to consider utilizing the other Longmont rides, for day-to-day activities. So I think those are things we're gonna be learning through the data to understand what that really looks like. And if we see data shifts, or we see fewer people riding the bus,
Yeah.
because they are taking advantage of this, then we may come back and re-examine that.
Right, I'm just saying, because is there any cost to use this via or not?
Yes.
Not for all.
Not per resident.
Not for the residents, there's cost to LHA. but
Sure, I
it's-
assume that there's a
Yes,
cost there, I
yes,
just wondering, like,
yes.
it's $1 for seniors to use the Longmont Ride
No.
service, which is.
We're funded through 2025 at this point, so
2026?
2026,
26,
2028.
The council put in some council contingency funds into this, and then I think we tried to work some of it into the LHA budget, correct? Kendra? Or were we able
I
to
thought we
do
were
that?
only funded through 2025.
It's not in the LHA budget, it's with LHTC.
LHTC, yeah.
And it's funded to 2026, I believe.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
City contract with LHDC, LHDC passes down to the
Yeah.
It's a,
So I appreciate that you're kind of, this seems to already be on the radar here, but like as Longmont Ride data starts to come in and as we start to ramp that up, I'd be curious if there, I mean, and depending on the ridership of the other via, if there are opportunities to either scale one back to allow something to be more sustainable long term. Just what that kind of rearrangement optimization could be
Yeah, there may
between
be,
those two services.
there's some inherent mobility issues though, when we look at the clients that we have in the LHA units versus the other via, because it doesn't pick you up at the door and take you to the door.
Sure.
And that's a big issue for the clients that we're serving here, so those are some of the nuances that.
Sure, even if it's just a scaling down of one, like just kind of figuring out what like it doesn't mean we just destroy one or eliminate one. It would be like what's the optimal balance between those two services for the people who do need those who do need this via for mobility reasons,
Right.
and maybe camaraderie and whatever community purpose that's certain in there. And then anyone else who's able to use the other service, which is, or if expanding the Longmont Ride in a few spaced areas for these types of properties could serve that function.
Yeah.
So, worth looking at. We don't have enough data to make that decision yet,
Right.
but just putting that on the radar. Okay. Unless folks would oppose this, I'd love to motion for a 5-minute recess. Is that for a 5-minute break? Is
I've
that?
never done that before. I don't know, now I'm nervous.
Is that not kosher?
Just take a break.
Just okay.
Yeah, about it.
That's
If you
fine.
need a bio break, you're welcome to.
Yeah, you don't need it.
You have to take care of yourself.
Yeah, we don't need to do
We give you permission. You can
go.
Do you want us to make a motion to would that make you happy?
I move that Commissioner Poppin
it. Can have permission to go to
5-minute break. Second.
I'm just gonna walk out.
Let the record show.
He has left the room.
I forgot to tell him this is a more relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it is, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we're just That's what it is. That's true, that's true. We haven't had anyone like new like that.
No, no.
He seems to be good with it, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep going. Yeah. So we're gonna go to the marijuana tax revenues for housing supportive services.
Sure.
This is interesting, go for it, Molly.
Okay, so currently, marijuana tax revenues are split half and half between mental health focused work and half goes into the Affordable Housing Fund to support unit generation. So in 2024, that for the half going to the Affordable Housing Fund was about $250,000. And because we've also, in about the same 2 to 3 year period, we're getting fee in lieu revenue now as well from the inclusionary housing program. And we're going to be having a Prop 1B allocation that we think we would have money in hand, hopefully about third quarter of 2025. The revenue picture on that side is definitely different from what it was 3 years ago. Still not enough to solve all of our housing issues, but it's definitely different. But in those couple of years, something that we have learned lessons at the suites and know that our clinicians model at the suites is a golden ticket. We also know that supportive services, specifically for those getting into permanent supportive housing, like the suites, like Zinnia, or other models as well, is one of the hardest funding sources out there to find externally. So something that we have been talking about is, since the ballot measure listed the purposes for the tax revenues would be, I should say, the resolution that council made allocating those funds, specifically list the purposes of mental health supports and affordable housing. We thought taking a portion of that $250 that goes into the Affordable Housing Fund and doing instead a supportive services for housing set aside to kind of expand on some of the work that we've done at the suites, take some of that into new directions, and we wanted to see what this group's thoughts were about that idea.
I think it's a great idea. I really do. We can't just house people. If we want them to get better and thrive and move on, we have got to have supportive services.
And it's expensive.
And it's going to be hard getting those dollars from the county because they get to decide where they're going.
Yeah, so part of it is, what really spurred this conversation is Molly mentioned earlier that we were trying to hire a clinician in one position. We just can't hire it. For the skills that we need, no, we just couldn't hire it. So they came to me and said, well, do we create a, what's the other position?
Either a program specialist, like a downgrade.
And when we had the conversation, for me, that didn't, it's like, okay, but we still need a clinician, and now we have a bigger gap to fill in order to get a clinician. And when we were looking at options, this really started showing itself. And what we know, so when we got into the suites, and we really started digging into the challenges and what was really driving some of the issues at the suites. At the time, the requirement that we had from the state was that we had to bring people in from the statewide system. We know that many of the most significant issues we had to deal with that was actually driving the creation of the clinicians and everything else was not from individuals that we were housing out of the Boulder County Collaborative, but individuals that were coming out of this broader system. So we had a meeting with the state, and as part of that conversation, we were pretty open about the fact that we had to fund the 3 clinician positions, the 2 that you all agreed to fund from the city, the one that we did from the housing authority, and then what we're doing with Sarah's position. And so we were able to articulate how much money we were having to put in locally to manage the situation that we had in front of us. They then agreed to say, no, you don't need to bring people in from the statewide system, you can just bring them in through the Boulder County Collaborative. Same thing we're seeing. And so I'm confident that I think we need to have some time to build that argument with Zinnia, and kind of saying, here's what we need. We also have, I think, there's a flaw in the state system, because when they were looking at supportive services long-term, there was a Medicare component that they were counting on in terms of funding some of the supportive services, and the Medicare is not coming through.
Oh, it isn't.
It's a state
Medicaid
issue.
reimbursement.
Medicare.
Yes,
Medicare.
but it's not, it was supposed to be, the ship was getting built as Zinnia was getting built, and the timing is not lining up.
And then they were counting on some federal legislation. And so one piece of legislation was passed, but it didn't do everything that it needed to do. And so there's some challenges in the Medicaid world in terms of that model. And so if we can do this and we can put it into support services, I think it starts sending us down the road of again making a similar argument on the other side about what we're having to do locally to ensure the success of the residents that we're housing, absent state funding and some other issues, because it's one thing to build a structure. You've got to have the ongoing operating costs to support the individuals that are in the structure. And I get that they put millions of dollars into this, but as we've learned, the building is the smallest piece of what you need to do to make sure people are successful.
Exactly.
So that's sort of the genesis of why we brought this to you.
Any other comments from commissioners?
So you're going to hear this again with your other hat on, because the way council approves this, it does give me the ability to make these decisions operationally. But because it was driven by council approval, I'm going to mention it in the council meeting as part of my city manager comments, saying, you've given us the ability to do this. We're going to shift this into the support services. And then that goes beyond, if we can do this, we may have room to do one more clinician. It goes beyond just, they need to service all our properties and even properties that we don't manage, because then it starts playing really well with lead and court and what we're doing in police, because then if we're able to manage more here, then lead and court has capacity that they're going to gain in that in terms of what they're helping us with as well.
Sounds good. So do you need a motion in order to approve this, or just a directive? So
I just didn't want to outrun your headlights.
Yeah.
And so if you're good with this, then
any dissents? Seeing none,
Seems appropriate.
to go. We are now on development updates.
I will. I'll just keep it brief though. Like we reported in January, we're kind of in that settling out the projects that are completing, keeping rolling on construction with Ascent, and sorting out now which one is going to rise to the top to be the next one. And so you kind of heard us allude to all the options that we've been considering tonight. And mixed into that is also a high priority is getting the Hearthstone and Lodge out of the 202 program. So Katie Pung, our development project manager, has started digging into that. We'll be bringing on a consultant, and we're going to have a call with HUD soon if anybody answers the phone to get some feedback from them on the process. So
Sean will find them when we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Go knock
I
on
was
those
so
doors for
disappointed.
us.
Our HUD rep, we had a brand new HUD rep that we've
That's
only
right.
had for about 4 months on the city HCI side. She was amazing, and she noticed us today. She's done. I don't know if it was voluntary or not, but it's very.
I'm hearing that from the Department of Ed, just representatives that I've been in contact with. And minority leadership and racial equity, I mean, we're resigning, you know. So it takes a long time to build those relationships too.
Yeah.
So every time I go to NLC, I connect with them, and it is.
So that's all I have for development, unless you have.
Update on operations occupancy report.
So, I have the same form of occupancy report we look at each time.
One thing that I added this time is you'll notice that the vacancy rates, the amounts are not included. And one thing I wanted to point out is this report that's included on the back end. This is one of the reports that is generated out of Yardi. And if you look at the first page, which is page 39 of the PDF, for Aspen Meadows neighborhood, you'll see the properties that have a move-out date in red are older, so they moved out last year. But I can only date the report from a start date and an end date. If I were to include all, like going back to, let's see, May of 2024, to capture the full vacancy of that one unit, it's gonna pull in any and all move-in, move-outs and vacancy for duplicate units. So it's not a great, it's not a great way to message it. So Kendra and I are gonna work together to figure out a better report that we can include, because just seeing the numbers doesn't give you the whole story either.
Right.
And so we're gonna work together to kind of find a better report that will work for what we're trying to figure out. Because this is just a snapshot of 1 month or 2 months or whatever. It's not gonna cover the one unit, its entire vacancy period, unless you isolate those one units. And then you're just, it's administratively a burden to do a single report for every single one. So I included them just so you could see that we've had a pattern of vacant units sitting for a long time, which is not new news. And it's something that we're working on. You'll see in the occupancy and availability report that we are making progress on getting some of these vacants filled. Aspen Meadows neighborhood happens to have a lot right now. We had one eviction recently. We have 2 project-based voucher units and 3-year tax credit that are vacant. And one is the eviction, 2 are pending an applicant, 1 is pending a move-in, and 1 is just ready to rent. I started adding a little bit more nuance and information because I think it tells a better story, gives you more information on what's happening at the property level. Another one that's had a lot of vacants, Fall River and Spring Creek. We've got Fall River working to fill more. I think at one point there were 7. We had a lot of deaths at Fall River and Spring Creek starting in November. A lot of them, I think like 5. And we've had about 3 or 4 at the Hearthstone and Lodge recently. 1 last night.
Not the last month though.
No, over the course, like starts in the fall.
You said deaths
Yes, tenant deaths.
from natural.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no crimes.
Just only crimes in the building.
I've never watched that show, but it's great.
How do you find out about the deaths? If they're living alone and?
It depends. If a lot of times people will transition over to assisted living or rehab or hospice care. The family will let us know what's happening. For an unattended death in the unit, we usually find out when we smell it, or somebody reports it.
Or by us.
Or they find out. And that, there's, a protocol that we go through. We'll clean the unit, have hazmat come in and take care of that. But unfortunately, and this is something I wish there was a better way to do it, but when we have someone who passes away who has no next of kin, no emergency contact listed, or no family to go to, we essentially have to evict them. We have to wait for the rent to not get paid, post a 30-day notice, wait for the 30 days to end, and then go to court and say, the tenant's passed, this is the process. There is no quicker way. So we're looking at 60 to 90 days of no rent in those.
In a few circumstances though.
If someone dies in the unit, they're the only tenant. The only way to basically reclaim the availability is to evict.
If they have no next of kin.
If they haven't. Okay.
So we have been lucky a few times where I've been able to find where for some reason LHA didn't have it, but I was able to do some digging and I found, I think, a couple times, but it's very rare. So, I mean, doing our diligence to make sure there is an emergency contact, but sometimes people just don't have anyone.
They're estranged from their family.
Yeah.
If the family's willing to come and clean the unit, clean it out, get it prepared and hand over the keys, we usually give them like 30 days to do so. They can pay the rent longer and have more time if necessary, but it does come up quite a bit where we have someone pass and there's no next of kin.
So we actually have the solution coming really soon. So you all heard about this enabling caring communities when you started it, where there wasn't anything out there that could connect people, where we have a database in terms of who's your caregiver. Over time, as we moved into Salesforce on the city side, Salesforce has built a platform that does this. And so what it's going to let us do is connect internally. So if somebody is a senior services client and they're in the LHA, we can type it in Molly O'Donnell and it goes, oh, call Brandy Queen.
Oh, okay.
Part of this is building a form in this process where we can get that information from the tenants and then put it in the system. So, and again, they have to choose whether or not to do it. But it really is trying to short circuit some of these things. And also where we have connections to caregivers and we can communicate at a different level. So they're making a lot of progress on that. I hope we're going to be able to beta test it mid-year or so.
I also started putting units on notice, which has been, when I look at the vacancies in Yardi, sometimes it'll say 5, but really there's only 3, but 2 people have given notice that they intend to move out next month. And so at least we'll know, not just ones that are actively vacant, but that we know will be vacant. Because with the way that this report is done, you could potentially always have 3 vacants, but they're always 3 different units. You would never know. Because we don't put the unit numbers. We can build a better report, hopefully that gives you that information.
The good news on this is in the staff meeting that I was in last week, Thursday, Tuesday. Quincy, Lauren, and the maintenance staff are doing a really good job of actually pulling that time frame in on the unit terms. And so we're already seeing progress in terms of the work.
For your benefit, LHA went through a rough patch last fall where we were down to 2 to 3 maintenance, where we now have 6.
Maintenance staff.
Yes. We had one that was on parental leave for 3 months, and then another that was let go, and then we had a position that we were trying to fill, an additional one that we had added, so.
So some due to circumstances.
Yes. I mean, LHA has historically had terrible unit turnover times.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yeah.
That's,
And is that measured on a number of days between turnover or a month?
days. It should be 5 to 7. But it's always month. So we're working on tightening that gap and doing a better job of having the property managers and the maintenance work hand in hand to turn units faster.
And then obviously the eviction discussion just happened doesn't help.
Right. Evictions in general have gotten harder as a landlord.
Yeah.
There are way more protections in place for tenants, which is great for the tenants,
Yeah.
but sometimes can make it harder to get them out.
Or to turn something open if they're no longer left.
The 2 vacants at Village on Main are project-based vouchers, and I think we have 2 households that are going to move into those units through the reasonable accommodation process, which will free up 2 of the basic LIHTC units, which will rent very fast because I think they're both 30% AMI, which are much needed. So kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, helping 2 homes better afford their housing costs while freeing up 2 units for other people who need those lower AMI units. And then the suites, only 1.
I know, I was very excited about that.
Wow.
And it might even be full by now. I don't know. This is from the 6th, so it might even have been rented by now. As far as our down units, we have the unit at the suites, which we have a contractor in place that we're going to use, but unfortunately during one of our first hard freezes, a pipe burst and leaked, and we had to rip more out of that unit to fix what broke, and so we're just waiting. We were waiting on the revised quote to include a couple more items. I think we're just waiting on the investor to approve the spending.
Yeah, we may have to
We may just have to spend it.
we just may have to spend it.
Yeah, it's one of those ask for forgiveness later type situations.
So the meth units have been cleaned up and are ready to be kind of seen meth units.
Well, the suites is the same one from before, and then 409 was just a clean, and we're just waiting on the report to clear that unit.
The new company that you used, do you like it? The one that just cleaned, it didn't have to take everything out of the studs?
Yes, we do like them. We had an issue with the industrial hygienist company recently, so we're now getting bids for a couple of, there's like very few in the state. There's maybe less than 10. So there's a company out of Evergreen that I got a quote from, and we're waiting for one from, I think Aurora.
Okay.
But recycles had some turnover, and we haven't, I personally been a little frustrated with some of the, timeliness of getting things done. And then Lauren and Quincy and everyone else waiting to turn, and so.
And that ties into a recent change at the state level for project-based vouchers, whether state-funded or federal funded. The state is going to be looking and scrutinizing the vacancies. If it's vacant for 60 days, then they're going to start asking a lot of questions, and you better have a plan to fill that vacancy in the next 60 days, or they could potentially remove the unit from the HAAB contract and you lose the subsidy. Obviously, in extreme circumstances like a meth rebuild, you would have more leniency, but there will be no more just vacant PDBs sitting there because it's a waste of their subsidy. So we have to pay a little bit more attention to that.
We may have to consider, in some of the work that police is doing, looking at volume to go, do we just hire an industrial hygienist?
Well, the meth task force that was created in the county is working on an RFP for that very purpose, to pay an industrial hygienist in-house that would work at a reduced rate for housing authorities and landlords in the area, and look at how we can reduce the testing costs, the remediation costs, and I think they have a larger aspirational goal of going to the state and trying to get money for meth-resistant materials, which would be nice if somebody could create meth-resistant materials to build with. That's really the solution, because they're going to do it. That's all I have. Oh, property updates. I don't have much to say about the specific properties. They're kind of doing their thing, not a lot going on. Sarah will talk about the Fall River Springs Creek self-reception project that's been kind of ongoing. But we have had some staff turnover on the property management side. We've had 3 people resign in the last month and a half, 2 months. So just the usual course of business turnover, nothing exciting.
Village on Main, I saw the article about the elevator.
Oh, the elevator, yes.
It was actually fixed the day that was posted.
Yes.
Okay, of course.
Yeah. And so the article was not bad, and it was 90% of what I told them, which is great. It was a shame that it went down. It's a capital improvement cost that was weighted in the redevelopment, and it was one of the more reliable elevators at the time. That's always a analysis you have to do if you're going to do a re-syndication. What do you spend your money on? So it was unfortunate, but we took every measure possible. It was painstaking and expensive. Put every tenant up in a hotel who wanted to be in one, and tried to minimize their travel up and down the stairs as much as possible. And it could have been worse. We could have had all 50-something households on the second and third floor of the hotel. So,
Yeah, that would have been really worse.
yeah. But they hung
And
in
they
there.
only have the one elevator, that
There's
big
just
one,
one.
for once, okay.
Yeah. Which, in the future, when we build more senior housing, we will put in 2. I will not settle for anything less than 2 elevators in senior housing.
Have you seen those cool elevators that are basically a pneumatic tube? That's
Yeah.
That would terrify me personally.
They're very cool, but they don't go like, get stuck.
Claustrophobic, I don't even
Not
like
like you
elevators.
drive in Bay where you. No, they go slow, but they're cool.
Oh,
Okay.
isn't it hyperloop?
Yeah. But then,
Okay, we are now at fourth quarter accounts receivables.
So this usually is how it kind of goes. 1 month, 1 quarter, you'll see evictions, a really large balance in past tenant balances. We work through the process of our bad debt. And then in the next quarter, we're writing those balances off and we start from scratch again. So that's kind of what you're seeing there with the 74,000 in September. And then by October, we're writing all of those off and sending them to collections. And we're down to 48,000. 3 of the properties, Aspen Meadows Neighborhood, the Suites, and Village, they had some anomalies happening. Like we had several of the suites that got filled in December through MHP, and a lot of the times MHP's voucher amounts don't come in for like 2 months later. So we'll see high balances until they actually issue payment to us. So that's a situation. We'll have evictions. AMN had an eviction, a PBV voucher holder that moved in and never paid rent. So they go through the eviction, and then we go through the process of writing off their balance and sending it over to collections. And then the last one, which is Village on Main. Village on Main had some issues where tenants weren't being notified that they had balances due, and there was anomalies because we also had PBV vouchers being added in December that also needed to be paid by LHA, and so there's always a lag of when those payments occur. So that's why they have a high balance as well. Do you guys have any questions on that report?
I'm curious, when you send it to collections, what is the percentage that the collections organization is to keep? And what is your return?
I think it's 75-25%, but
They've never collected anything.
they've never collected anything.
Oh,
to date.
The
Yeah.
problem is our population, they just usually can't find them.
yep, they disappear.
They disappear and they can't find them. So I don't know if we need to try a collection agency. I don't know if it's something we need to decide, because there's a lot of administrative work sending it over to collections. And if there's no money we're ever seeing from this, is that even worth the time and the effort? I know the property managers try to get a repayment plan, but a lot of the people that are leaving are either evicted, disgruntled, deceased, so in those situations, it's just not possible.
Are there any other questions on the receivables? How about the financials?
Yeah, so the financials are really kind of going to display a lot of what Lauren was saying. Our biggest tackle is the vacancy dollars, and how we went over budget almost on every single property except for the Hearthstone and the Lodge. The Hearthstone and the Lodge have a very long waiting list, and those seem to be very easy to fill as opposed to our other ones that have 60% units or 50% units. Some of those are really hard to fill. Once they become vacant, finding somebody that can afford those rents. I also highlighted.
What in your opinion is like the reason for the vast difference in ease to fill?
So each property has a number of units, and each unit is designated a certain AMI. So the 30% AMI units are easily filled, yeah, but 60%, and then we have to, as an organization, say, can we get somebody in at 50%? And do we need to make that or continue with the vacancy loss as it is?
And the 202s function very much like a voucher, so it's a much deeper subsidy than even just a 30% LIHTC unit. Like a 30% one bedroom is $700-ish a month, and someone moving into a 202 property is only going to pay 30% of their income towards the rent, and then HUD picks up the rest. So those are very sought after.
And that's separate from the voucher program.
Correct.
Yes.
That's the 202 crack program through HUD, which we're trying to get out of.
For a different reason.
Yeah.
Because you don't manage your revenue coming into the property. You
Or the
basically go, here's what I need, they give it to you, so
I see.
they don't fund certain
They
things.
don't give it to you?
Or they don't give it to you, and they don't fund certain things you need to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
What you have to be careful in this is, so historically, when we came in and we started looking at this, Village on Main was probably the biggest problem we had. They were keeping it occupied. But what they were doing is that if it was a 60% AMI unit, in order to keep their occupancy numbers up, they may put someone in who only qualifies at 40% AMI. So what happened was it started creating a financial strain on that particular property because they weren't ensuring that the margins were close enough. And so you've got to be very careful with your financials on each one of these properties when you make a decision to say, do I want to keep it vacant or do I want to fill it? Because if you do that to every unit in the property, then you financially won't make your budget. So that's why every time this comes up, it's a conversation. And you're looking at the property as a whole to determine what you have in the property to make the decision of, yeah, we can lower this from a 60 to a 50 or a 60 to 55, but you can't do it. You can't do it across all units.
Some of the other anomalies are just the bad debt expenses that happen. We did this year decide to budget for those. So any amount that we budgeted as a revenue, we automatically budgeted as a write-off. So that will have those numbers as well. And then, the Hearthstone actually had a lot of appliance replacements. And that's what we're finding out is as these properties age,
Yes.
we're gonna see larger costs. And we try to keep it within the budget without having to tackle the reserves because, we want to use those reserves for higher costs that we know are coming down the pipe, roof repair, and stuff like that. So if we can keep it within the budget, we can. It's kind of a monitoring process throughout the entire year. This, you'll also see, a lot of what happens with LIHTC properties is they put loans in the property with really high interest rates so they can have losses on the property. So in December, what you'll see is large costs occur for both depreciation and interest. We don't do those on a monthly basis because we want to make sure we're monitoring the budgets. But you'll see that on these financials, and these are only property financials because that's all we've completed so far. In the next month, you'll see LHA financials and where they're at, but these are just the property ones.
Any questions on the financials? Okay, let's move on to EOY.
That is the
End of the year.
Yeah, do you want to do that like for me? It's kind of tiny.
That's it.
Yeah. So this is kind of an exercise that actually HUD had us do when we went through the shortfall process, and I kind of liked their template. What this will do is it's the new one, yeah. Yeah.
This is what 6.9 is.
Yeah. So the top section will show what amounts came into us. So what HUD issued for payment. And then we monitor exactly how many vouchers and what we pay every single month. And we report this on a monthly basis to HUD. And this keeps us kind of and lets us know what our restricted net position is. So all of those negatives is we were underfunded. And by the end of the year, we were underfunded because we hadn't got all of our reserves. So HUD still owes us $78,910 from our reserve balance. But it could be worse. The negatives could be larger, but they try to have us, we send it every month. They'll give us extra money. They'll reevaluate our vouchers along with our admin and give us additional funding. And I'll kind of go over the 2-year tool the next time so that you can get a foot on what that is. It's basically a tool that HUD gives you so you can monitor what your vouchers are going to look like in 2 years. So it does kind of an evaluation of what they're seeing in this current month, and it does an evaluation to say, okay, your per voucher amount is this. We're going to increase that by 5% each month to give you a gauge of, are you going to be in shortfall? Are you not? And how many vouchers do you have coming in? What PBV vouchers do you have yet to fill? And so forth. So it's a big, massive spreadsheet with a lot of macros that the City of Longmont's IT system does not like. So, becomes very complicated, but that's kind of where we're at. And in the top corner, if you scroll up a little, in the top corner, it'll show you what our UMAs are. So we actually have 517 vouchers because we have 5 vouchers that were given a little while back. And then the UMAs, like what we could go up to in an annual. So we could have had 6,204 voucher payments that have gone out if you were at the 517. But we only had 5,006.
Okay.
So that's our annual vouchers that went out for the entire year. And then it says, are you overleased? It says no. So it does the same calculations on the side. And so we'll start our restricted net position with HUD in 2025 with the -78 and move from there. And it's the same process on the admin side too. So the admin has its own path. And we actually have quite a bit of admin that wasn't used in past years. We're kind of holding on to that because that's also another path that HUD will take to say if you guys have a lot of admin, you may need to use that towards your voucher payments.
Can I make a suggestion that someone can send all of the acronyms to Matthew so he can, because it's hard. There are a lot of acronyms and.
Send it out to all of us.
Yeah.
I already memorized it, let's budget.
Yeah, so.
What is the
Yes.
EMS UNRP?
Yeah.
Okay,
Voucher
so-
management system.
So you mentioned it's the 78.9 number that is HUD still has that technically owes Longmont.
Yes. Yes.
What is the percentage likelihood that we expect to see that?
Well, I've emailed HUD and I have not heard back. So it's when you get into the reserve piece of it, so the regular amount, they'll automatically give you on a monthly basis. But when you reach into your reserves, you have to request it. You have to say, I'm in my reserves, I need to request.
So that involves personnel being available on the other receiving
Yeah,
end
and
to be
they'll-
able to provide that.
Correct, exactly.
Can we send HUD to collections?
So,
Good luck with that.
he hasn't responded to me on that particular question.
Housing Authority did that.
We started in the negatives though. Is that, am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, it would.
The beginning
So-
equity was
so here's-
57,000 in the hole.
We were 35,000
Yeah.
in the hole.
Oh, well, in January. But by the
Before
end
you
of
go to DC.
December, 57.
No, 78.
To highlight which line item we should
Top
look at.
line there.
This one. 78.
Okay.
So this is another piece we went through. When we went through the shortfall funding, they give you an analysis and they say, is there dollars that you have added into your amount, your RMP, that are affected in prior years? So we had some, it gets really tricky. In the last year, we had to figure out how to report our fraud recovery, because technically, on the accounting side, you recognize fraud when it's recognized. So if we recognize that somebody owes us $35,000, you're supposed to put $35,000 on the book, which changes your restricted net position. It increases it, right? Says you just got $35,000. but we didn't. Technically, we only got like $200 in that month. So we had to change the way we do our allowance for doubtful accounts with this particular piece. So if you have 35,000 now that's owed, you have 35,000 as allowance of doubtful accounts until it comes in. So in prior years, we had reported revenue from fraud recovery that they were saying we had to back out because technically we didn't receive it yet.
Yeah.
So they had us do this whole exercise, and Harold had to certify to the number that we came up to, and they reviewed my findings, and they came back and said, here's what you need to do. We had to change the amount and adjust it. So the auditors will be made aware of this as well, but that's why that is at 35, because we were at 287 with the additional revenue that was reported because of GAAP guidance. You have to report what's, and we didn't know we could do this anomaly. I contacted a consultant that you can do the full amount as an allowance for doubtful accounts until it's actually received.
Well, it looks like in May, they caught up, yeah?
They did, yeah. May was probably about,
Can we expect that in May again? I mean,
well,
it's
May
under
might
that.
have been when we started reaching out to the shortfall team and asking for reserves. So that was probably the trigger for the first reserve payment, and they make you do the 2-year tool. They make you submit some documentation to them to get reserves, and then they fund it pretty quickly. So that's probably what occurred there, but then it just went down. And then you can also see there's even anomalies as they go along that they're raising the amount based on what I submit in the voucher management system on a monthly basis.
So they're anticipating.
They're anticipating it, or they're seeing it, so they're adjusting the balance. We get emails monthly showing what the new calculation is and what we'll be receiving, but we never could get. I'm hoping this year it won't be as bad because now our fair market rent is lowered. Now, technically, what that means is we can't, for people that were already at the 2024 fair market rent, we can't lower that for them because they have to be given a year's notice to be able to adjust and accommodate for rent increases that they would have to pay for. So anybody new coming in, a new voucher coming in, if it's a new PVB, you can lower that amount to the new, but you can't adjust the people that are already at that top level.
So the short story is if you think governmental funding counting is mind-numbing,
Yes, it is.
the HUD process came in and said, hold my beer.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something?
No, it's like they took their job and pushed it down. Instead of just saying, here's the number of vouchers. They said like, we'll do my math. Figure it out yourself.
Like kind of how we have to do our own taxes, even though
Yeah,
the federal government has basically all the data with a few exceptions.
Same.
Yeah. Return free, but
I'm not a satisfied customer, so I want my money back.
Okay, so there's no more discussion on the end of year vouchers. We're at public health and safety updates.
All right. So as of this last month, seriously, all properties have 0 calls for service minus the suites, 7 calls there, 4 welfare checks, which is very, very good. 2 calls at AMN. 4 of those were welfare checks and 3 of them were core units, checking just routine checks with residents, so those numbers are included with the data. Village on Main had 4 and just 1 welfare check, and everything else was 0. Few updates on my end. Our fire marshal is going to, in it's March, sorry, had to think. She's gonna go in March to Village on Main to talk to the residents about evacuations. They're really, those residents really want, we have many new residents there, and several of the existing really want folks to be able to hear her speak about evacs specifically, and I have some questions that one of our residents is basically going to be able to give to Michelle, so that's more directed to them. One of our core paramedics is going to be going into our senior properties for the health prevention education. He wants to, Omar, I don't know if you know him, he wants to go in and talk about fall risk prevention and some other community health programs that are available. So that'll be great. He's going to be doing that in April at Coffee and Conversations. Our cameras were provisioned on February 11th in Washington, and I'm still waiting for a delivery date. Very soon, I hope. We have a plan mapped out for that as far as install, so stay tuned. Lauren and I, with the meth detector, going into Ascent, we've talked about the SOPs for them and the updated addendum. We're currently working on that. We should have it finalized by this time next month. We need to have Tim look at a few things when we get it finalized. So we're just prepared for when those come in, when we do the install for the residents at Ascent. And as far as Fall River and Spring Creek, that cellular connection that Nextlight was coming in, they had some equipment issues, and then there was, I think, some vacations being had, but they basically started the project and then we didn't hear anything, so we revisited with them, and they're coming in tomorrow, and it sounds like they might be able to do a skipped floor program with some new things that they found, which will save us some money as far as that cost. So those residents will be very excited for that. And Nextlight will be coming in to do the educational piece, because the smartphone thing and understanding how to connect and do that, and then understanding that they can't use their laptop or Kindle or anything else to connect. It just is for their cell phone.
Okay.
So that's all I know.
Out of curiosity, do you ever use the Boulder County Area Agency on Aging for some of the programs that they offer?
We have not. Maybe we have in the past. I'm not sure.
I think we have in the past,
Have you?
but we could re-engage. That might have been focused through Lisa back at the time.
Yeah.
They did a whole
Something to circle back to.
on that at whole report 2 or 4 months ago.
But they're reducing their funding too.
Yeah.
Everything's reduced. Okay. We are at the end. We're commissioner comments.
Everything else is reduced.
Thanks for
except-
tolerating all the questions. And I think we have our training scheduled for about a week after our the City Council retreat. So we'll dive into all of this more together. Thank you.
So I am going to say that I had a meeting, I already told Harold about this, with Shaquille Dalal, and he is very interested, of course, as always, in that middle income, but he's also interested in having different types of housing, and told me that he was working with LHA on some middle, yeah, I know, see that look,
Right in time.
on attainable housing, and perhaps using funding through LHA, I don't know how. But I did ask Harold, and he said, no, my whole point is that if he contacts any of you, that was the conversation.
So it hasn't happened. We do not have it.
He has not contacted LHA that I know of.
Okay.
Not LHA, the only thing I talked to him about was ADU plans, but there's complexities with the ADU plans because they were funded out of the Affordable Housing Fund. And I think they want to take the ADU plans and have an architect or someone update them, but then give them to people. But because we use affordable housing funding, this is more on the city side, They would have to do some kind of deed restriction based on the funding source that was used to pay for the creation of that, but it was merely a, I'll talk to you about this,
Okay,
so
so, yeah, so he assumed that that was working with LHA.
it's not LHA, it's actually, but again, there's fund accounting complexities.
Okay.
Maybe he thought he was meeting with the interim executive director.
There you are, some
He thinks he's still working with you.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's all I've got.
to adjourn?
Oh, we,
You go ahead.
I thought we all did
Comments?
things that way.
We just were flexible about the biobricks.
I'll listen here. Nice work. I move we adjourn. You want to second that?
It has to be
You can
moved
leave
that we
whenever.
adjourn.
I'll second that.
He wasn't the one that said it.
Moved that we adjourn by Commissioner McCoy, seconded by Commissioner Popkin. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned.